Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we're so happy you could join us today. For many in-state governments, the demand for mental health care services is outweighing available resources, and governors across the country are looking for ways to help. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is the chairman of the National Governors Association, and he recently hosted listening sessions featuring hundreds of mental health care experts and state officials to share what they have learned about successful mental health programs. So we're going to be discussing those ideas in the second half of the show. First up, we're speaking with the New Jersey Black Empowerment Coalition Action Network. It's a nonprofit organization that advocates for policies to address issues faced by people of color here in our state. Joining me now is the Executive Director, Thomas Valera Jr. Thomas, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and giving me an opportunity to speak about our work.
Yeah, well, first off, can you tell us a little bit about your organization?
Yes, so the New Jersey Black Empowerment Coalition Action Network, we are a 501c4 nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to advancing racial justice policies that speak to our community. And through our C4, we use research, education, and community engagement to create a society where everyone has equitable access to opportunities and resources to create generational wealth. And so we're excited to begin to do this work and create a space for everyday citizens to better understand how they can engage with their elected officials and understand how they can analyze the performance of their elected officials.
A lot of people think they know what the issues are that are facing certain groups and people of color, but can you articulate what specifically are you talking about when it comes to challenges and issues that people of color are facing in New Jersey today?
Yeah, so I think in all communities, when you think about people of color, many are trying to achieve what all have been trying to achieve here in America, and that is the American dream, being able to own a home so that they can generate wealth that allows their kids to go to college or to help support their kids starting a business or to purchase a new home. So housing is very important in that regard. Being able to participate in democracy. Knowing that democracy is at the bedrock of America. When we think about the idea of America, democracy is at its forefront. And so all communities want that opportunity to participate in an open and fair democracy where their voice is heard. When we think about generational wealth, that's very important. And creating opportunities for communities to build generational wealth so that their generation and their generation, future generation, are able to once again strive towards that American dream, which has always been the bedrock of America.
And are you finding, or what are you finding are the issues that people are having when it comes to simply showing up and casting a vote? Is it a feeling of my vote doesn't matter, or are there other issues of accessibility and being able to take time off of work and being able to get to those polling places?
Yeah, I do think those are issues when you think about people's ability to, get off of work and find time to vote. You also have individuals, and I think I had a colleague that mentioned this, and I think it was pretty profound. Many of us that have a privilege, we can see voting as a luxury, and individuals that one would say need to vote, we may think that it's a necessity that they vote. They see it as a luxury from the standpoint of they have so many other responsibilities that are top of mind that voting doesn't come up as important, even though one can make an argument that all the challenges that they are experiencing, voting is an opportunity to do so. And I think one last thing, we do create this perception that voting is this magic cure-all. And because of that, when we don't see change after our vote, we can quickly become disenchanted and frustrated with the process, right? And I think that's something that all communities have to keep in mind when we think about participating, is recognizing that voting is just one tool. There's going to school boards, there's monitoring your elected officials, there's supporting your elected officials. If you believe an elected official is doing well, then putting your voice towards, in terms of fundraising or just being a voter, that allows you to also communicate your support of a candidate. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, is that that fact that voting is just one tool that's a part of being an active citizen.
Yeah, and you mentioned about holding lawmakers accountable. Your organization recently released a report, and it's really kind of a scorecard on how legislators vote on issues you say are critical. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we worked with a national company, a national organization, Hit Strategies, that has years of experience assessing the views and concerns of Black voters across the country and locally. And so, in our process, we looked at the bills that were proposed and the bills that were passed, and we also looked at the attendance record of legislators to help and determine what their performance looked like. And so, one of the biggest findings that we saw was that bills that we believe will advance the needs of marginalized communities were only introduced and were not moved through the legislature. Over 75% of bills that were proposed were only left at the introduction stage. And that's concerning because that one speaks to missed opportunities that the legislature could take advantage of to help support communities that have been historically negatively impacted. But then, two, just from the standpoint of just your simple performance level, why is it that so many bills are being left on the table? What are some of the things that exist that's preventing these bills from moving through committee and then moving through a full vote and then ultimately being signed by the governor? I think that's something we have to think about when we think about the effectiveness of our legislature. Is their job is to propose bills. And so, one could make an argument that if there's a legislator that is not in support of a bill, then allow that committee to do the due diligence and make that argument during committee, right? The fact that these bills don't even get a fair hearing to go through the process, that is of a concern. Because if the argument is that the bill is not a strong bill, then the opportunity is to do so in committee, where they can hear from legislators, they can hear from representatives, they can hear from everyday citizens that can advocate for or against those proposed legislation.
Yeah, do you feel that you're just being paid lip service because, especially right now, this is an election year? You go to a lawmaker, hey, these issues are important. I want these to be addressed. Sure, let's hold a press conference, and they hold a press conference, and then boom, nothing else happens. And I hear about this a lot. And as a political reporter, I know this happens, and then you don't hear anything about it. Can you talk a little bit do you feel like you're just being paid lip service?
In some cases, I think that could be a fair assumption to make. I do know that we have to be cognizant that, with elected officials, they do have to think about their priorities. And while we are really pushing for the legislature to understand the priorities of our organization, the legislature has to consider so many different demographics. And they have to kind of make those determinations as to which bills they want to prioritize. Now, we believe that they should be prioritizing bills that help support marginalized communities because economically it makes sense when we think about how do we uplift communities, give them an opportunity to purchase a home, give them an opportunity to start a small business. This actually helps America and, more importantly, New Jersey better when you're given opportunities for individuals to participate in the system, being able to, take advantage of what America has been known for, which is purchasing a home, starting a small business, creating a space for your community to go to college and go to trade school, and just be able to exist to the best of their ability.
Yeah, I mean, some of the bills, there have been some bills that have passed, and you alluded to some of those. There are some that help students with apprenticeships, also some through the Economic Development Authority to help those small and minority-owned businesses. So can you talk to some of your success stories?
Yeah, so we did see from a voting perspective, the last few years, the legislature passed S3203 that provides early voting. They also looked at being able to provide school lunch, at A32368, to be able to provide school breakfast and lunch to address some of the concerns around hunger. So I think those are things that we can point to as positive because it helps not only marginalized communities, but all communities that are impacted, that they're able to take advantage of those resources from the legislature. So I think those are always positives that need to be highlighted, and we thank the legislatures for considering those.
Yeah, and what about the issues that you think that the legislature may not have acted on yet, and that you're hoping they'll be able to take up in their next session? What are your goals for the next session?
Yeah, no, we do believe, A4554, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in New Jersey, that's top of mind when we think about protecting the right to vote and strengthening the opportunity to vote. When we look at opportunities to look into the public option in terms of healthcare, that's something that's important, A5029. When we look at environmental health, being able to protect communities that may be dealing with lead water, that's something that is critical to our community as well, because issues of lead can have traumatic impact in terms of crime, in terms of just academic success, and in terms of their future. We've seen countless cities and states that have been highlighting how lead has had long-term impact on communities. And so we have to think about these bills, while they may feel immediate and they may look at pressing issues, there is a long-term impact that we're trying to address when we think about legislation. So those are bills that we hope will get moved forward in the next legislature.
Yeah, and ultimately, as a final thought here, when you're talking about building up that generational wealth, I mean, in order to do so, you need that good foundation. And you were talking
Exactly.
and alluding to things as access to lunches, to the breakfast, at the education level. And are these children getting what they need?
I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the bare minimum? And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. I think there is this feeling that what is the bare minimum that a legislature or government should offer its children has changed. I think historically we saw education as something that we want to fully invest. And I think when we think about philosophical arguments as to like who should be provided for, and if so, what should they be given, I do think that we have moved the goalposts as it relates to what's the bare minimum that a citizen or a child should have. And I think we have to ask ourselves, why are we changing the goalposts? Why are we not looking at opportunities to provide our young people with the tools and resources that they can achieve what they are destined to based on what their individual goals? We're not here asking for everyone to achieve the same goals. We're asking individuals to achieve what is destined within them in terms of their individual goals. And our government should see that as a goal, because ultimately we want our future residents to be able to provide, to be able to create the future businesses to help maintain and strengthen New Jersey's performance. And so we have to think about that when we think about investment. It's not just a moral argument. There's an economic argument to why we need to invest in the future.
Yeah, right. And you hit on something really key. And for each individual, that's going to look different, what their particular potential is. Thomas Valera Jr., thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
No problem. Thank you very much. I look forward to continuing conversations.
We'd love that. Thank you. Governor Phil Murphy is hosting a nationwide listening tour focusing on mental health issues as they pertain to our children. Dr. Tara Shalakani is a clinical psychotherapist and the CEO of Preferred Behavioral Health. She joins us now to talk more about the issues facing our young people. Doctor, welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm happy to be back.
Yes. Well, first, can you talk a little bit about the governor? What is he doing through these listening sessions?
Well, what the governor has done as chair of the National Governors Association is created a mental health playbook for all governors across the nation to help guide them in implementing meaningful mental health programs. So this is a nationwide event. The playbook focuses on where certain states have excelled in some domains and where some have some work to do. Right. And I'm happy to say that New Jersey really is ahead of the curve in many areas, which is a really good thing for us.
Well, I think one of the key things is when no matter what you're struggling with, it's all about that early intervention. So can you talk about what's happening, because this does pertain to young people, in the early intervention, actually identifying what are the needs and getting people connected to those right services? What's New Jersey doing?
Well, what Governor Murphy has affirmed is what we in the behavioral health realm already know, that children were struggling terribly before COVID, and the impact of the pandemic has really escalated the needs of our youths. And so this playbook has really focused on 4 pillars. And the pillars are, first and foremost, building prevention and reducing the need for crisis services and building resiliency in children. The second is really creating awareness and destigmatizing mental illness, followed by creating access and affordability to care. And then lastly, educating caregivers and offering additional training and support. So these 4 pillars have been critical to all behavioral health providers, but what Governor Murphy has done is really given us more exposure and placed a significant amount of media attention and importance on these 4 pillars.
Yeah. So when it comes to prevention, preventing people from getting to that crisis, there is a mobile response team, and that provides a 24/7 access to behavioral health workers. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it's helping?
Sure. So it's a statewide program, and Preferred Behavioral Health is proud to be one of the providers of children's mobile response and stabilization services. This is a 24/7 365-day-a-year program where any parent or caregiver in the state of New Jersey can access immediate crisis intervention by calling Perform Care New Jersey. And that's a 1-800 number, and it's dispatched by county. And with 1 hour, you will have a team of crisis intervention specialists meeting you where you are in the community, working with the family and the youth to create a safety plan, and then remaining with the family and the youth for 8 weeks after to offer support and create referrals to meaningful treatment.
So when somebody's in crisis, they may not remember a phone number, they may not remember a website. Is there some type of a system in place to where if you Google, I'm in a crisis, that those phone numbers, those resources will come up? Because, when you're in the middle of something, you're not always thinking clearly. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. I mean, we do have the 988 hotline, which is specific to suicide. However, whomever is answering that phone, I'm sure, can connect an individual to resources. But if you want to Google, I would say to a parent, mobile response. Those are the 2 key words. And in New Jersey, that will get you to where you need to be and connected to the children's system of care.
Are there enough resources? Because, as you mentioned, even before COVID, young people are struggling, whether it be through issues at school, online, social media, right? It's really difficult to be a young person. Are there enough resources, or are you looking to try and expand to get even more for when those calls do come in, to ensure somebody can not only pick it up, but get those resources to them in a timely manner?
Well, given the current volume of demand of youths and the wait lists that I know exist in our field, I would say that there are not enough resources currently. And one of the initiatives that is addressing this is the new Department of Children and Families funding, which is the New Jersey 4S, the statewide student support services program, which will be available in every county and is creating a robust hub and spoke model, which will be meeting children where they are, in schools, in community centers, in houses of worship. And they will have access to personnel that will then refer them to treatment providers. So the primary initiative, which is going on right now in preparation for a September 1st launch, is going into the communities, finding all the providers and pooling all of the resources so that these robust hubs are ready at the beginning of the school year to get our students connected to safe spaces where they can receive mental health services.
As a young person is reaching out for help, you might have parents who are saying, suck it up. When I was your
Right.
age, I had to deal with way more, or life
Right.
isn't fair. But they're coming to
Absolutely.
it from a different lens.
Yes, and as a direct clinician, something that I do have to work on very often when I'm working with younger people is educating their parents. Because I'll hear things like, well, how can they be depressed? I saw them having fun with their friends. So it's not about that. It's about really educating them on what the symptoms look like, and that sometimes kids are really faking it. They're putting on a happy face when they really do not feel good inside. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And we don't tell kids to shake it off or suck it up when they're having a bronchitis or they have a fever, right? So because behavioral health issues are a little bit more subjective, where we can't pop a thermometer in someone's mouth and say, oh, your depression is high today. It's a really hard thing to gauge, which is why we need more education.
Right. And then another point that you were talking about with those pillars is really teaching resilience in young people, how to be able to bounce back some of those life skills, because you are going to get knocked down and life isn't fair. And sometimes you do have to suck things up when you don't want to.
Sure. And when we are in a bad place, when someone is really struggling, it's very, very difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So the education is key, that this will pass, this is temporary, but really validating that we know, getting out of bed is an effort. When people are clinically depressed, being just awake, breathing can be an effort. Showering is an effort. So to expect kids that are struggling to go to school and get good grades and be a star athlete and also, figure out all of their social issues, it can feel really insurmountable and just impossible to overcome.
And that is very difficult for certain parents, a lot of parents to understand. Like you said, they look happy. They have every single resource at a fingertip, the technology, everything is there. And you were just laughing the other day with your friend. So how serious can this be?
Sure. And there are children who are struggling and don't know where their next meal is coming from. And then there are children who have every luxury at their fingertips, So when children are on the latter end of the spectrum where they have everything, parents are even more confounded. You have an iPhone. We went on a cruise. What do you have to be upset about? You have everything. So I think that there's a disconnect there when students have the great fortune of having a lot of luxuries in their life, so to speak, that then it's even more like, how could you even be sad when you have so many wonderful things in your life?
I'm sure that's very frustrating for you as a clinician, having to deal with that. It compounds it, to getting a parent, a guardian to get on board with that. But I did want to ask you one other question on another topic, because as children are once they get ready to go back to school in September, can you talk about some of the challenges that might be going unnoticed by parents and teachers over the summer? Things might be festering a little bit more. Just final thoughts on what we can do.
Sure. Well, I always say summer is this magical time because everyone seems a little bit happier. The sun is shining. There's no stress of schedules and sports and homework. But I do believe that children have a lot of anxiety before school starts. I certainly see that in my clinical practice, where children have a safe space to verbalize these things. But if a child really isn't engaged in therapy and don't have an outlet, it might be something that isn't discussed because it's just assumed we're going back to school. So I think just having some dialogue, like, how are you feeling about school starting? Or what are you excited about? What are you nervous about? Those open-ended questions that prompt answers, rather than, are you excited about school, where that's a yes or no. ask the what. What are you excited about, or what are you nervous about? And maybe if you were a little nervous about going back to school when you were growing up, share a little bit so that your child can connect with you. I know a lot of kids have Sunday night scaries. They're afraid on Sunday night, thinking about Monday morning. So we have summertime scaries where we know school's coming back into session. So just talking about it, not being afraid to broach the subject. I know sometimes parents and caregivers might feel, well, if I bring it up, I'm putting an idea in their head, or
Right.
I'm making them. But
Right.
kids are much, much smarter than that. So I think we have to give them a little bit more credit and have these good discussions. How are you feeling about going back to school? And let them tell you how they're feeling instead of making assumptions.
Yeah, well, as a parent of special needs children, I know I get really stressed because I've got to deal with the IEPs.
Sure.
And so we don't talk about it. We're not like Fight Club. We're not going to talk
Right,
about back to
right.
school. But, some of those things will probably alleviate their stress as well as a parent's stress as well. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also think that it's okay for parents to say, like, oh, I loved the summer. It was so laid back. Now we have to go back to making lunches and
yeah.
schedules. I think just making it okay for them that, you're a little stressed out too. There's no harm in that. We're all human. We're all experiencing something. And there's no harm in showing our children that we have feelings too.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for sharing your insight on this. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Laura.
And we thank you for watching New Jersey Politics. I'm Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.